You know, when you see these huge companies decide to join forces, it makes massive headlines. But what you don't always see is the incredible obstacle course of legal and regulatory hurdles behind the scenes. Today, we're going to run through that gauntlet and figure out why some of the biggest deals you've ever heard of, well, why they just never happen.
So let's start with a huge real-world example. We're talking about the $85 billion proposed merger between the telecom giant AT&T and the media powerhouse Time Warner. This deal wasn't just big, it was the kind of deal that was going to test the very foundations of how we regulate business today.
So why was this one deal such a big deal? Well, because it was a major test case for what we call vertical mergers. That's when companies at different spots in the supply chain decide to combine. So think about it. A company that makes the content, Time Warner, merging with a company that distributes that content, AT&T. The way this case went was going to set a precedent, sending ripples across the entire tech and telecom world for years.
So, the deal's announced, you've got handshakes all around. But does that mean it's a sure thing? Oh, not even close. What is actually standing between that agreement and the finish line? Well, as it turns out, there are two really powerful gatekeepers that every single deal has to get past.
The first gatekeeper, their main job is all about protecting the actual owners of the company. We're talking about the investors. So before a deal can even start to worry about competition, it has to pass a whole series of really strict honesty tests.
And these honesty tests, they're officially known as securities laws. They're enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. These laws were basically born from the ashes of the 1929 market crash, and their mission is actually pretty simple, but it's absolutely crucial. Force companies to be totally transparent so investors don't get tricked.
It really all boils down to three core ideas. First, companies have to disclose all the important stuff, the material facts about the deal. Second, they've got to keep investors in the loop with regular reports. And third, and this one is huge, people on the inside are strictly, and I mean strictly, forbidden from using secret info about the merger to make a quick buck for themselves. It is all about making it a level playing field. Okay, so let's say a deal manages to clear that first hurdle. Well, now it faces an even bigger challenge. It's time to convince the second gatekeeper, let's call them the competition police, that this merger isn't going to harm the marketplace, and by extension, you, the consumer. Now, regulators like the Department of Justice or the Federal Trade Commission, they see two really different types of deals. You have a horizontal merger, right? That's between direct competitors, and it gets a ton of scrutiny because, obviously, it means fewer choices for you. But then there's the vertical merger, like our AT&T and Time Warner example. That's a lot more complicated. The big question there is, does combining a producer and a distributor give this new giant company an unfair advantage over everyone else?
To answer that, regulators don't just go with their gut. They use math. Specifically, they use something called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or HHI for short. I know it sounds really complicated, but it's basically just a scoring system to measure how competitive a market is. By squaring the market share of each company and adding it all up, you give way more weight to the biggest players, and it paints a really clear picture of who holds all the power.
And here's what that actually looks like. In a market with a low HHI score, you've got a bunch of companies of roughly the same size, all competing. But in a market with a high score, you see one massive company that just towers over everybody else. That is the kind of thing that sets off major alarm bells for regulators. It suggests there's a serious lack of healthy competition.
And this isn't just theory, right? The FTC has a literal scorecard they use to decide what to do. If the score is below 1,500, the market's looking pretty competitive, so a challenge is unlikely. But if a merger pushes that score about 2,500, then the deal is presumed to be anti-competitive, and those companies have a real fight on their hands.
But here's the catch. Tools like the HII were designed more than 100 years ago. They were built for an economy of steel and oil. So how in the world do they apply to the massive tech titans of today? This is where that old rulebook starts to get really, really complicated.
I mean, it really makes you wonder, right? Can laws that were literally written to break up railroad monopolies effectively regulate companies that run on data and network effects? The fundamental ideas of antitrust are being tested right now like never before.
These platform businesses, think Google, Amazon, Facebook, they're a whole different animal. Their power doesn't come from controlling a physical thing, it comes from having these massive networks of users. And they often offer free services, which makes it hard to argue they're hurting consumers with high prices, which is the classic way you'd measure a monopoly. So now regulators are asking a different question. Are these giants using their power in one area to completely crush innovation and competition in another? That is exactly what's at the core of the recent cases against them.
So after all the scrutiny, all the math, all the legal battles, what actually happens?
And maybe more to the point, how does the final verdict end up affecting us and our wallets?
A lot of the time, the outcome isn't just a simple yes or no. It's a compromise, and it's called a consent decree. Regulators might say, okay, we'll approve this merger, but you have to agree to certain conditions. That could be something structural, like forcing them to sell off an entire part of their business. Or it could be behavioral, like making Google promise not to use all that Fitbit data for its advertising business.
And let me tell you, the stakes for getting this wrong are just enormous. When the European Union decided that Google had abused its market dominance, they didn't just slap them on the wrist. They hit them with a record-breaking $5.1 billion fine. That just goes to show you how seriously regulators all over the world are taking this stuff.
You see, in this really complex dance of mergers and acquisitions, regulators are always trying to balance what's best for everybody. So the next time you see one of these massive merger deals in the news, just ask yourself, who is this deal really for? Is it for the shareholders, the consumers, or the company itself? I can promise you, the answer is never as simple as it seems.